Welcome to Courtney on Health, heard on MalcolmPresents.com, a streaming network heard around the world. And do the intro, Max.
Yeah, hey, hi. Hi, hey ho. Hi,
Hey,
Courtney. Hi,
Yeah.
Courtney, and hi, Malcolm. Welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast podcast series which focuses on one's overall well-being with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravenese, registered dietitian and exercise physiologist. She's an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and beyond the New York metro area, and will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So here's the topic that we're going to be discussing. I'm going to start it off, and then I'll let Courtney deal with all this insanity. So we're in the summertime, and so everyone's aware that a tick bite is not a good thing. Most of us are familiar with Lyme disease, but now there is something else to be on the lookout for. People are becoming allergic to red meat after getting bitten by a certain tick. The bite of the Lone Star tick. There should be music that goes da da da. Found in the U.S. in the South, the Midwest, and the Mid-Atlantic, can trigger a bizarre and sometimes dangerous allergy to red meat, which is beef, pork, and venison, dairy, gelatin, which is in your JELLO, animal byproducts, and some medications. It's called alpha-gal syndrome.
Alpha-gal, G-A-L?
Alpha-gal, yeah. As cases rise, doctors are saying that there's a variety of reasons, but the expanded range of the Lone Star tick seems to be the most problematic right now. People are hiking, camping, and doing various outdoor activities, which puts them in more contact with ticks. It is believed many people go undiagnosed because they don't realize they have the allergy and mistake it for some other food illness. And that's why a lot of doctors don't even know about it. So with that, Courtney's going to give us some, good info on this latest tick-borne illness. And I looked at this and I was like, I was scared. So
Yeah, I think I saw the movie on TV the other week.
The Tick.
Yeah.
The tick?
Really exactly.
There's a movie there's an animation also, The Tick, which is supposed to be funny. I don't know. This isn't funny. So what is this all about? What is this alpha-gal?
So
What
we'll give you the whole rundown. And before people get confused, it's like, why are you talking about, tick? You're a dietitian and you're an exercise physiologist, and it really loops back to the fact that this is connected to specifically a red meat sensitivity, allergic reaction to it. So it's important for people to know that if they have any of the symptoms that we're going to talk about, that it can't be linked to something else, that it is possible, again, possible being the emphasis there, that it could be related to this tick. So let's talk about it. So the Lone Star tick. So Lone Star tick, because as you mentioned, Maxine, it originated in first identified in Texas, or the region around Texas, but it is also because the female tick has a lone single white dot on her back. So Lone Star. So the progression or the movement of these ticks seems to be migrating, not necessarily west. It's really more coastal areas, southeast. So in our particular area here in the New York area, coastal areas in New Jersey, coastal areas out on Long Island, there seem to be greater rates of this, Lone Star, bite, this allergy to it. So the gal is actually short for galactose. So it's alpha galactose. So ironically, it's actually a sugar that mammals contain, except humans. Obviously, we are mammals. So mammals possess this, and other animal and mammal derived products contain it, but humans do not. So think about pigs, think about lamb, goat, cattle. They carry this, and we don't. Obviously, they have it. If a tick bites one of the, has one of this trait and bites a human, then it's transmitted to us. We develop a sensitivity or an allergy to it. So even though it is a sugar, it is actually odd that we then become allergic to proteinous foods. So just like you mentioned, Maxine, it can be anything that's considered red meat. So lamb, pork, beef, venison, goat, anything in that category. Because most gelatins, not all, but because most gelatins are derived from mammal products, anything that has that coating on it. So it could be a piece of candy. It could be more common would be something like a medication or a capsule, or that coating on the outside may have gelatin to it. So they are seeing individuals who aren't necessarily eating red meat, but they are taking a medication, and it might be linked to the gelatin that's on those particular pills or capsules. So it's, the CDC has identified this, between 2010 and 2022. There have been about 110 cases. So it's not necessarily the flat amount, it's the rising rate that is causing a little bit of concern. And even healthcare providers are not super comfortable diagnosing this. It's relatively new. The research and what we know about it is constantly evolving. So unfortunately, according to the CDC and recent polls, there's only about 5% of the healthcare practitioners that are super confident in their ability to identify this and then diagnose it properly. So it really is something that is being watched very, very carefully as it continues to unfold, because we're learning more and more, every month and every year that this is being followed.
Courtney, just a quick question. Because you said 110, but here I have 110,000 cases.
110,000. I'm sorry.
Right.
What did I say?
110.
No, 110,000. I'm sorry.
Right. 110 would be, they would not be looking at it. Right.
I know you're going to get into this, but is there treatment for this?
There's no treatment per se. So if you are having, and it could be anything from hives to a rash to wheezing, and those are bad enough. I'm not saying they are not, but it could be as life-threatening as anaphylaxis, issues, shortness of breath. So it really can run the gamut in terms of your response to it. So certainly they would treat you with perhaps epinephrine, some type of antihistamine if you're having a more pronounced reaction to it. So that would be the only, in quotes, treatment for it. But unlike different types of tick bites where you might get, for example, an antibiotic, that's not the case with this. It would be, if needed, and some type of either topical or oral antihistamine, epinephrine if needed, and then of course vigilance in what you are consuming. So unlike a typical allergy, which may often appear within a shorter amount of time, the reaction to the Lone Star tick and that alpha-gal is going to be within 2 to 6 hours. So that might be helpful for folks to say, okay, when was the last time I had any red meat, or to a lesser extent dairy foods? I know dairy is obviously from a mammal, but it appears to be less associated with dairy foods like cheese and yogurt than it is with something like, a burger or steak or something along those lines. So that 2 to 6 hour window might help an individual really identify, is this possible? Because the more information they are able to give their healthcare provider, the healthcare provider will then be able to say, okay, let's do an exam. Let's perhaps do a blood test, and in all likelihood that blood test is going to be looking for antibodies to that alpha-gal, and that's how it is properly diagnosed. So it's specifically looking for those antibodies to that alpha-gal.
Now, if you stop eating red meat or the things that causes it, will it go away, or whether it stays in the system but you won't have any symptoms?
Yes, it will go away over time. So the literature is a little, and I imagine over time, as they continue to follow this, and now that there's such a spotlight on it, they will probably gather better information. But I've seen anything from symptoms will, eventually it will go away entirely within as short as like a year. But I've seen on the outside as long as 5 years. So what that means, if you are somebody who does enjoy, red meat, any red meat, is that you can safely consume that. After that time, your body maybe just builds up, just like we know from many other tolerances, your body will build up a tolerance to it. So it's not forever that you need to avoid red meat products. If you eat those, it might just mean that for a short amount of time, you're going to need your body some time to get used to it. Remember, that tick bite only lasts for a certain amount of time. So what's in your system? So remember, you get bit by a tick. Right. So you've got that in your system. It's not going to live there endlessly. So that's the 1 to 5 year period I'm talking about. So you get bit by a tick, and then you have to avoid red meat for roughly, that amount of time. You have to be vigilant about tick bite prevention, just like, we are often recommended, right? You got to watch where you are outside, check your clothing, maybe even wear preventative type clothing that has EPA approved compounds in it to help prevent ticks from getting on you in the first place. And even, certain sprays. Look to the EPA site for guidance on the safest ones for you and for your family. But you really have to move into sort of hypervigilance mode if you have been diagnosed with this alpha-gal syndrome, in terms of preventing it from happening again, meaning preventing from getting a tick bite again.
Well, apparently, wait, hold on. Doctors are not catching this because a lot of them don't know about it. First off, like, which doctors would you go to? I mean, you're going to go to your first line primary. They're going to not know what it is. Perhaps you need someone who specializes in allergies, someone who specializes in immunology. I mean, who sees this? Who's looking at this now?
Yeah, well, I would say certainly first line can't hurt to be your internist, your primary care physician, but in all likelihood to have the type of diagnostic testing. So for example, it could be a skin test, allergy testing. That's typically not done by a primary care physician. That's typically done by an allergist. So I would say, in short, an allergist would probably be the best type of medical doctor to see, because they are better equipped to know what kind of blood tests to draw. And then of course the skin testing that they can do. Both of those are in all likelihood going to be part of the diagnosis protocol that they're using in order to get the answers they're looking for.
Right.
Wow. Now, how long have these ticks been around? Because again, I've never heard of them before. Is it there's a sudden birth rate of these ticks that, or is it someone bringing it in from some sort of foreign country that we're never here?
I don't know if it's they necessarily know for sure. I mean, like I said, it originated in specifically the South, specifically in Texas. That's where they found that specific tick. And then over the years, and the most, like I said, the data that I saw from CDC was basically looking from 2010 up until now. So maybe because we're having some warmer winters, that they're able to, multiply at greater rates than they were before. So they like that, like I said, that coastal warm air. So if that environment doesn't have a break here in like the Northeast, where we would typically have a blast of cold over winter, just like many other pests that we see not going away, they're going to be around and able to multiply throughout the greater region. So I don't know if they know exactly where it came from. They do know, I mean, there are obviously many different types of ticks. The 3 most common would be this one now, the Lone Star, obviously the one that is line carrying, and then the pesky one that ends up on our dogs and
The dog ticks, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the one thing I did read about this one, which might give some answers as to why it's seems to be moving to a greater part of the United States where it wasn't before, is that it appears to move much faster than the average tick. So I'm sure part of the research is just, their mobility. So apparently it moves quicker than the average tick. So that's something to keep in mind. But again, I would say the best, as it relates to foods, keep in mind, don't lose hope. And I had, when this first came up, I was like, okay, does this last forever? It is not forever, assuming, of course, you do not get bitten by another Lone Star tick. But it is not forever. It could be as short as a few months. Your symptoms go away. It could, and you can continue to eat meat, but it could be up to a couple of years. So just brace yourself for that and know that you can resume, certainly, red meat consumption, dairy, cheeses, and things like that after a certain amount of time.
As a dietitian, you're on the lines of this because you're dealing with foods, and so I saw in the notes there's elimination diet. Is that something, if you were working alongside an allergist, if a client had this or patient, whatever, that would be what, you'd have to eliminate these foods?
I would say that's why it's super important to, first of all, see an allergist, because without a proper, you don't want to fly blind on this. You would really want to see an allergist and have he or she come back to you and say, we did a skin test, we've done the blood work on you, and either yes, you are testing positive, or no, you are not testing positive. So working in conjunction with an allergist and say, okay, let's just assume you're positive, right? And you do carry this. And then it could be, okay, well, is it all red meat? Or is it dairy at all? And I would say, pulling everything out, which is generally the way an elimination diet works, and then pulling something back in. So I would say, given what they know about the lower rates of dairy being an issue, pull dairy back in first. So let's say yogurts and cheese, see if you are having any kind of symptom. And I would say this is much safer if you're just having a skin related issue. So if you're having a rash, you're having hives, clearly, if your response to this was anaphylaxis or shortness of breath, I don't think the risk is worth the trial there, quite frankly. That would be my opinion.
Right.
So I would say you just have to wait it out. So it really would depend on how bad your response was and how closely you're being monitored, and then just how painful it is, for you to not have, these foods. So that would be my general, starting point.
Yeah, so I guess
these
people are
attack
if they're
also?
camping, they have to have an issue checking this
Yeah,
out.
you got to be so careful about tucking. I mean, and the same rules apply. You got to tuck your, your pants. You certainly skin. You got to check when you come in. I get it if it's really, really hot out. You don't want to wear, long pants. High socks. But hikers know this. Hikers know the drill typically. And if they do go out, they not only check their clothing, because remember the tick can come in on your clothing, and if that doesn't if you don't find it and remove it, it can move its way. If you put those clothes back on again, it could crawl underneath the cuff and get onto your ankle, or it can be underneath a collar on a shirt. So you really want to check that clothing. You really want to check skin underneath your hair, nape of the neck. On kiddos, I actually found, not a Lone Star, but I found your average run-of-the-mill tick on my son's stomach. You get it, you pluck it off, and I've had mixed responses as to what do you do with it. Do you put it in a container and have it tested? And I think that's a conversation that you need to have with your primary care physician about what to do with it now and looking for those symptoms.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Because this, I would think, if you can get the Lone Star, if you see the Lone Star and you can grab it out, I would put that in a plastic baggie and see if you can send it to the CDC or somewhere where
Sure.
they can identify it. And
do they attack animals also? I mean, your cats and dogs, and
I don't know if they're seeing. I don't know if there's. I mean, I don't know how they would do a study like that, Malcolm, because the reality is,
they can't complain.
Dogs and cats eat meat. That's what those teeth are for, right? So I don't know, I suppose, but they're already the mammals that, remember, they are among the group that carries that sugar molecule already. We do not. Fish don't. Poultry, chicken doesn't. Turkey doesn't. So I would say there's a greater risk of maybe a chicken getting, having some kind of untoward response rather than a mammal that already carries the molecule.
Well, as I say, thank you for these uplifting words. before
Well,
you,
you know, it's
No,
information. And here, so I would say for some, so again, back to food, I would think if you're somebody, again, anaphylaxis is that's a different ball of wax, right? That's very different. You need immediate care, EpiPen and so forth. But a rash that's not going away, you can't quite figure it out. You're been unable to rule out something else as the trigger for it. I would say if it's either something along those lines, certainly bring this to the attention of start with your primary care physician and then maybe move on to an allergist. If you're having unresolved GI issues, because some of the symptoms that alpha-gal syndrome can cause would be in the absence of, let's say, a rash or anaphylaxis, it could be GI symptoms. So it could be diarrhea, it could be stomach upset. So you can see there's a whole really very wide area of symptoms that they're seeing with this alpha-gal syndrome. So I would say if you've got unresolved issues, GI issues, or a rash that you haven't been able to figure out where this is coming from, I would certainly raise the attention of healthcare providers. Just like you said, Maxine, like because they're generally at this point seems to be a general unawareness of it, it certainly would be worth an ask.
this is the first time I heard of it. But anyway, guys, that's the end of our time.
There it
Oh
is.
boy. Well, this was
Another disease to
this
worry
was a
about.
fun one, Courtney.
Sorry. Okay. It doesn't
I think
mean
it's
not-
very important.
I know this doesn't mean
No,
don't
it's
go
important.
outside. Don't be afraid. Just be aware, right? Just
Right. You can't take your head and and put it in the sand and hide. It will
Can't do
affect you.
Sure you
Anyway,
can.
Courtney,
No.
you'll be away next week. You'll be away next weekend.
Right. Next
Next
week.
week, so
Yeah.
we're gonna do
So
a rerun. I'm not sure what show yet.
We'll rebroadcast something. You'll let us know and enjoy your time off.
thank you.
We'll miss you. So anyway, thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, on Instagram and TikTok at CLG Wellness. Visit her website, CourtneyGravities.com. For past shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. This has been Courtney on Health, smart, sound nutrition, strong, safe fitness, and we will catch you again next time.
And
guys,
have a great
have a
time,
great
Courtney.
week.
See you in 2 weeks. Bye.